And some of that comes from the places that we grow up in, right? I had a chance to go to Vermilion, South Dakota. Anybody ever been to Vermilion, South Dakota? Yo, their airport is like half the size of this room. It's so small. Seriously. And it was two black people there, me and a person taking the luggage off of the plane, right? So it was not diverse at all. It's like 87% people who are classified as white. So I was speaking at the law department at South Dakota University out there. And I'm like, man, if I moved out here, I could probably start a business of people just taking pictures with a black person because they never seen black people like that there. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. The only time they probably seen black people was on Fox News and CNN, right? But people who grow up in an environment like that, that's homogenous, they're not really exposed to many different people, right? So if you're growing up in an environment like that, you have to be more intentional with how you invest your time and the things that you're able to learn about your human family, right? So you have some people who are growing up in an environment like that, and they have a very isolated view of themselves as well as the world. But then you also have parents who understand the type of environment that they live in, and they're much more intentional about investing in their children and exposing them to different type of cultures. You see the complete opposite in Lithonia. Anybody been to Lithonia? Okay. So it's kind of like the opposite. You have children who grow up in environments like that. They don't see white people like that, right? So they may have a similar perspective in terms of the lack of exposure and understanding about different cultural perspectives. New York City is a little bit more balanced. So you grow up in New York City, especially if you live in a housing complex, your neighbor to the right could be from Russia, and the neighbor to the left could be from Puerto Rico, right? And then you grow up in an environment where you're exposed to many different people from many different places. So there's a different type of mindset that you would have based upon that environment that you grow up in, right? Now on the Canadian side, you see similar type of different demographics. Toronto's similar to New York City. It smells a lot better. It's nicer. It's more pedestrian centric. Cars will wait for you if you walk across the street in Toronto, right? But you have many different types of people. Toronto's considered one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the world. And if you're a foodie, yo, you can go there and get food from anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world. You could just close your eyes and point on a map and say, I want to get food from here. And you will find somebody or business that makes that type of cuisine there, right? That's Toronto. Burnaby, that's a little bit different. They have a very large, what you would consider Asian population there. So if you grow up in an environment like that, you know the difference between a person that comes from China and Burma. If you don't grow up in an environment like that, you may just think everybody comes from China and not know those nuances or subtle distinctions in culture. And that's because of the environment that you grow up in. Chatham, Kent, that's similar to Vermilion, South Dakota, right? You look at the demographics right there. So environment plays a critical role in how our consciousness is shaped, and then also how we engage other human family members. And when you're traveling places and you come to places to like Niagara Falls, there are certain type of demographics here, right? And when you're planning to do events or to do projects and initiatives in other different cities, that's something also important to consider, that you have different type of demographics, you have different type of needs, and you want to make sure that you have a sense of what the terrain looks like. Now, this is some, I don't know if you're writing anything down, but remember this. The map is not the terrain. The map is not the terrain. By the looks of all of you, we all grew up in an era where if we wanted to travel somewhere, we would print up directions on Google or MapQuest, right? And those directions didn't tell you about inclement weather. It didn't tell you about certain type of landmarks. It didn't tell you about road work that was actually going on. It didn't give you none of that information. But when you got on that land and on that terrain, you started to learn things that you can see from an eye level that an over aerial view does not give you. And that's the exact same thing about life itself. You know, many of you have been exposed to some of the map of Niagara Falls, some of the things I'm going to share with you today is about what that terrain actually looks like. And it's important to talk about this because this is the mentality that many people have about, oh my God, DEI. That's a mentality that some people have about it, right? But here's the irony of it. The problem is the belief that white people, particularly men, who have historically been in leadership roles in every industry, are the only ones who have been qualified to be in those positions. So DEI introduces a variety of qualified representation and challenges less qualified people who have historically been in those positions. So in other words, it's not really about unqualified people getting positions because you're checking the box. It's really about, you really believe that people who've been serving in these positions as CEOs and COOs and these executive leadership positions, you really think that these people are the only ones who have been historically qualified to serve in that capacity? You don't think nobody else is that qualified? And if you do believe that, that's kind of problematic, right? So it's really the challenge to that idea of a certain type of status quo.